Sarah Holloway's wedding day shattered into humiliation when her groom failed to appear, leaving her to face the town's cruel mockery of her size. 6 months later, a little girl's words silenced every whisper when she looked up at her handsome cowboy father, took Sarah's hand, and announced for all to hear, "She is pretty, Daddy." Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The whispers followed Sarah Holloway like shadows through Timber Creek. They slithered between storefronts, coiled around hitching posts, and slipped through swinging saloon doors. 28 years old, 260 pounds, and dressed in her late mother's wedding gown that strained at every seam, Sarah was the object of every cruel joke in the small frontier town. "Here comes the bride," Elmer Jenkins called from the barbershop doorway. "Better reinforce that church floor, Reverend." Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the dusty path ahead, clutching the small paper wrap bundle against her chest. Inside was the veil she'd spent 3 months stitching by candlelight, adding delicate beadwork to the lace her mother had worn 29 years earlier. She'd learned long ago that looking at the mockers only fed their hunger. "Don't you listen to them fools," Martha Wilkins had told her that morning while helping her dress. God sees the heart, not the waistline, but Martha wasn't here now, and Sarah's heart felt as heavy as the bodies buried in the cemetery on the hill. She passed Garland's general store, the bell chiming as the door opened and 2 women emerged, their laughter cutting off abruptly when they spotted her. "My word, she's actually going through with it," one whispered, not quietly enough. "Poor Thomas," the other replied. "Imagine being so desperate for land you'd saddle yourself with that." Sarah's cheeks burned. She'd heard it all before. How Thomas Blair was only marrying her for her father's ranch. How no man would choose her for anything else. How she should be grateful anyone would have her at all. The worst part was, in the darkest corners of her mind, she feared they might be right, Miss Holloway. The voice belonged to little Emma Porter, the milliner's daughter, who darted out from between buildings with a fistful of wildflowers. "Are these pretty enough for your wedding?" she asked, eyes wide with the innocent excitement only an 8-year-old could maintain in a town bent on cruelty. Sarah's tight throat loosened just enough to answer, "They're perfect, Emma, thank you." The girl beamed, dropping into a clumsy curtsy before scampering back to her mother's shop. Sarah tucked the flowers carefully alongside her veil package and continued toward the church that stood at the edge of town, its white steeple reaching toward an unforgiving sky. Inside, Reverend Paulson was arranging hymnals, his perpetually furrowed brow deepening when he saw her. "You're early, Miss Holloway." "The ceremony isn't for another 2 hours, I know, Reverend. I thought I might help with the preparation." He glanced around the empty church. "Mrs. Paulson has everything well in hand. Perhaps it would be best if you returned later. A bride should make an entrance after all." Sarah recognized the gentle dismissal for what it was. The Reverend's wife had made her feelings quite clear. Sarah was making a spectacle of herself, pretending to be a normal bride when she was anything but. The church could tolerate her family's tithe and occasional attendance, but watching her waddle down the aisle in white was apparently a bridge too far. "Of course," Sarah murmured. "I'll come back." She turned, nearly colliding with Merce. Paulson, whose arms were full of drooping wildflowers, nothing like the vibrant blooms Emma had gifted her. "Oh, Sarah, we weren't expecting you yet." The woman's smile was strained. "Thomas hasn't arrived, and we're still arranging things." "I was just leaving," Sarah assured her. Stepping aside, Mrs. Paulson's face softened with what looked alarmingly like pity. "It's for the best, dear. Perhaps you might want to rest before the ceremony. Brides need their beauty sleep after all." Sarah nodded and slipped out, the church door closing behind her with a finality that felt like judgment. With nowhere else to go, her father's house was 3 miles outside town. She'd already said her goodbyes to her childhood bedroom. She found herself wandering toward the small park where Timber Creek held its summer festivals. The oak trees offered shade from the August sun, and Sarah sank onto a bench, careful not to wrinkle her dress more than necessary. She unwrapped her veil, fingers tracing the beadwork that had kept her company through lonely evenings. It was beautiful, even if its wearer was not. "You getting married today?" Sarah startled. A little girl, perhaps 6 or 7, stood before her, blonde braids peeking out from beneath a sunbonnet, eyes curious rather than cruel. "Yes," Sarah answered. "This afternoon." The girl stepped closer, examining the veil with undisguised fascination. "It's awful pretty. Did you make it?" "I did. It was my mother's lace, but I added the beads." "My ma died too," the girl said simply. "Pa says she's watching from heaven, though. Maybe your ma is too." Single quote. Sarah's throat tightened. "Maybe so. Can I touch it?" "Careful," Sarah warned, but held the veil out. The child's fingers were surprisingly gentle as they traced the pattern. "My name's Lucy," she offered. "Pa and me just moved here. It's buying the old McKinley place, the ranch with the broken windmill." Lucy nodded. "Pa can fix anything. He's gonna make it work again, and we're gonna raise horses. The best horses in the territory," he said. Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time that day. "That sounds wonderful, Lucy." "Lucy, where'd you get to, girl?" The deep voice carried across the park, and Lucy turned. "Over here, Pa." Heavy footfalls approached, and Sarah tensed, preparing for another encounter with another townsfolk who'd look at her with disgust, barely disguised as politeness. She kept her eyes down, fixed on her veil now folded in her lap. "Making friends already, I see." The man's voice was warm, tinged with the faintest hint of a southern drawl. She's getting married today, Pa, Lucy explained. Look at her pretty veil. It's mighty fine work, he agreed. Curiosity finally drew Sarah's gaze upward. The man standing before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and his eyes, a startling blue against sun-darkened skin, held no mockery as they met hers. Jack Archer, he introduced himself with a small tip of his hat. Seems my daughter's found the belle of the town. Sarah couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped her. Hardly that, Mr. Archer. His brow furrowed slightly, but he offered his hand. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Holloway. Sarah Holloway. She took his hand briefly, surprised by the gentleness of his calloused grip. Miss Holloway's marrying someone today, Lucy informed her father. At the church with the pointy top, is that so? Jack Archer's expression remained pleasant, though something flickered in his eyes, perhaps the first recognition of what Sarah represented in Timber Creek, the fat spinster who'd finally found a man desperate enough to take her. Sarah stood abruptly, gathering her veil and Emma's flowers. I should go. The ceremony's at 2 o'clock. We just might stop by, Jack said, surprising her. Being new in town, it would be good to meet some folk. Pa, can I bring Dolly? Lucy asked. She likes wedding. If Miss Holloway doesn't mind a rag doll in attendance, Jack replied with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Sarah found herself smiling back. Dolly would be most welcome. Then it's settled, Jack said with another tip of his hat. Congratulations, Miss Holloway. As Sarah walked away, she heard Lucy's piping voice. She's pretty, Pa. The words, spoken without guile or agenda, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. The child saw only a bride in a white dress with a handmade veil, not the mockery Timber Creek had made of her. Sarah returned to the church with renewed determination. Thomas Blair might be marrying her for her father's ranch. The townsfolk might laugh behind their hand, but today she would become Mrs. Blair, and tomorrow she would begin a new life. One where perhaps someday she might believe a child's innocent assessment over the town's cruel whispers. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the church's small back room, Martha Wilkins fussing with the veil now pinned atop her carefully arranged hair. There, Martha stepped back, her weathered hands clasping together. You look a vision, child. Sarah faced the spotted mirror propped against the wall. The woman who stared back seemed both familiar and foreign, her round face framed by the delicate veil, her mother's dress straining across her bosom and waist. She'd let out the seams as much as possible, but the fabric still pulled in places it shouldn't. The lace collar felt tight around her neck, like hands gently choking her. Sarah whispered. Martha's expression softened. Every woman is beautiful on her wedding day. It's God's gift to brides. A knock at the door interrupted them. Martha cracked it open to reveal Reverend Paulson, his expression grave. Miss Holloway, might I have a word? Sarah's heart stuttered. Something was wrong. She knew it with the same certainty she knew winter followed fall. Of course, Reverend. Martha squeezed her arm before slipping out, leaving Sarah alone with the minister, whose pity now seemed to have transformed into something closer to discomfort. I'm afraid I have ... Difficult news, he began, clearing his throat. Thomas sent word. He's ... indisposed. Sarah stared. Indisposed? It seems he had an unfortunate encounter at the saloon last night. Too much whiskey, I'm told. Is he hurt? Sarah asked, though even as the words left her mouth, she understood what was happening. Reverend Paulson wouldn't meet her eyes. No, not hurt. Simply unable to attend today. The walls of the small room seemed to close in. He's not coming. I'm terribly sorry, Miss Holloway. Perhaps another day would be better suited. No. Sarah's voice was strangely calm. He's not coming today or any day, is he, Reverend? The minister's silence was answer enough. Did he send a message? Any explanation? She pressed. Reverend Paulson shifted uncomfortably. Only that circumstances have ... changed. He mentioned something about reconsidering the terms of certain arrangements. The land, of course. Her father must have amended the deed transfer, perhaps seeing through Thomas's transparent intentions. Without the ranch as incentive, Sarah herself wasn't worth the trouble of marriage. I see. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Thank you for telling me. Would you like me to address the guests? There aren't many, but no. Sarah's fingers found the beadwork on her veil, anchoring her. I'll do it. The Reverend looked relieved. Very well. Take all the time you need. When the door closed behind him, Sarah remained motionless, staring at her reflection. All the whispers had been right. No one would choose her for herself alone, not Thomas. Not any man in Timber Creek. A sob built in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She would not give them the satisfaction of her tears. With trembling hands, she unpinned the veil, folded it carefully, and wrapped it once more in its paper bundle. The church's main room fell silent as she emerged. Only a dozen people occupied the pews, her father's ranch hands mostly, a few neighbors, Martha and her husband. At the back, to her surprise, stood Jack Archer, hat in his hands, with Lucy beside him clutching a rag doll. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, her voice steadier than she'd expected. I appreciate your coming today, but there will be no wedding. Mr. Blair has ... reconsidered. A murmur rippled through the sparse crowd. Her father's foreman, Mr. Peterson, half rose from his seat, his face darkening with anger, but Sarah shook her head slightly. The last thing she needed was someone fighting her battles out of pity. Please enjoy the refreshments Miss Paulson has prepared in the church hall, she finished. No sense in good food going to waste. She walked down the aisle with her head high, though each step felt like wading through quicksand. The pitying glances were worse than any mockery. soft, sad eyes following her. Mouths turned down in manufactured sympathy that would transform into gossip the moment she was gone. Outside, Sarah gulped the fresh air, willing herself to make it to the hitching post where her father's wagon waited. Just a few more steps and she could escape, drive back to the ranch and hide away from Timber Creek's judge, Miss Holloway. Jack Archer's voice stopped her. She turned to find him approaching, Lucy trailing behind, clutching her doll. Miss Archer, you needn't. I thought you might want these. He held out Emma Porter's wildflowers, which Sarah had forgotten inside. The little girl who gave them to you would be sad to see them left behind. Sarah accepted them with numb fingers. Thank you. Jack's blue eyes studied her face. For what it's worth, I think Mr. Blair has made a grave mistake today. A harsh laugh escaped her. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied simply. A woman who treats a child with kindness when her own heart is heavy, that tells me more than 100 conversations could. Lucy stepped forward then, her small face solemn. Are you sad because you didn't get married? Sarah knelt, careful of her dress. Yes, Lucy, I am, but I'll be all right when I'm sad. Dolly helps. The child thrust her rag doll forward. You can borrow her if you want. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. That's very generous, but Dolly belongs with you. Your kindness helps more than you know. Lucy considered this, then nodded. Pa says kindness doesn't cost nothing but means everything. Your pa is a wise man. Sarah rose, meeting Jack's gaze briefly before looking away. Miss Holloway? Another voice called from the church doorway. Martha Wilkins hurried down the steps, a covered basket in her arms. You forgot the food I packed for after the ceremony. Can't have you going hungry just because that worthless Thomas Blair lost his senses. Sarah accepted the basket. Thank you, Martha. Need help with the wagon? Jack offered. No, I can manage. Sarah secured her parcels in the back before climbing onto the seat. The reins felt rough in her hands. Thank you both for your kindness. Lucy, it was lovely to meet you. Pa, Lucy tugged at her father's sleeve as Sarah prepared to drive away. Can Miss Holloway come see our horses sometime? The ones we're gonna get? Jack's eyes met Sarah's. She'd be welcome anytime. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and snapped the reins. As the wagon pulled away, she heard Lucy's clear voice carrying on the afternoon air. She is pretty, Daddy, even if she's sad. The wagon crested the first hill, and Timber Creek fell out of sight behind her. Sarah finally allowed the tears to come, not for Thomas Blair or the wedding that wasn't, but for a child's simple kindness in a world that had shown her so little. At the ranch, her father waited on the porch, his weathered face a mask of controlled fury when he saw her return alone. That snake-bellied coward, he growled as he helped her down. Peterson told me what happened. I'll have words with Blair, you can count on that. Please don't, Sarah said wearily. It's done. Single quotes. James Holloway looked at his daughter, the last piece of his beloved wife left in this world. You deserved better, girl. Always have. Sarah clutched the paper-wrapped veil to her chest. Maybe someday I'll believe that, Pa, that night. Sarah carefully hung her mother's wedding dress back in the wardrobe. It would never be worn again, not by her, certainly. But as she closed the doors on the white fabric, she found herself thinking of blue eyes that held no mockery, and a child who saw beauty where others saw only sighs. 3 weeks passed, and autumn painted Timber Creek in hues of gold and amber. Sarah had not ventured into town since the day of her non-wedding, sending ranch hands to fetch supplies instead. She threw herself into work mending fences, preserving the last of the garden harvest, and helping her father with the ledgers. Physical labor left her too exhausted to dwell on humiliation, and numbers had always made more sense to her than people. You can't hide forever, her father said over breakfast, watching her spread apple butter on a thick slice of bread. Town needs visiting, and Peterson's got enough on his plate without playing errand boy. Sarah concentrated on her breakfast. I'm not hiding. Ain't seen you put on anything but work clothes since. There's no need for finery when tending chickens, she interrupted. James Holloway sighed, pushing his empty plate away. Got word the mercantile's got that fabric you ordered for winter quilts, and Martha keeps asking after you. I'll go tomorrow, Sarah conceded. Good. He stood, reaching for his hat. And while you're there, might want to stop by the land office. Got some papers need signing. Sarah frowned. What papers? Been thinking about that north pasture. Not much use to us with the creek dried up, but it borders that property the newcomer bought, the Archer fellow. He's asked about water rights. Sarah's heart stuttered at the name. You've spoken to Mr. Archer? Met him in town last week. Seems a decent sort. Knows horses. High praise from James Holloway. Anyway, he's fixed that old windmill. Got a well dug. Says there's enough water to share if we're amenable to an easement. And, are we? Sarah asked her. Her father shrugged. Makes sense. Land's no good to us dry. Besides, his little girl took a shine to that pinto filly we couldn't break. Offered fair price for her, too. He bought Pepper. Said his daughter wouldn't stop talking about the pretty horses at Miss Holloway's ranch. Figured you wouldn't mind, seeing as no one else could get near that ill-tempered beast. Sarah couldn't help smiling. Pepper was stubborn and skittish, much like herself, she supposed. Lucy has good taste. Her father's shrewd eyes studied her. You've met his girl, then? Briefly. On dot. That day, understanding crossed his face. I see. He settled his hat on his gray head. Well, Papers need signing either way. Maybe you'll see how that filly's faring while you're at it. The next morning, Sarah dressed with unusual care. She chose her green calico plain but well-fitted and twisted her hair into a neat bun. The mirror reflected a woman determined not to appear as though she cared what Timber Creek thought, even if her trembling hands betrayed her. The wagon ride to town felt interminable. Each house they passed represented people who had witnessed or heard about her shame. By the time they reached Timber Creek's main street, Sarah's knuckles were white around the reins. "I'll meet you at the general store in an hour," her father said as he climbed down. "Need to see the blacksmith about those new shoes for the bay." He's left alone. Sarah steered the wagon toward the mercantile. Inside, Mrs. Porter looked up from measuring fabric, her expression shifting from shopkeeper's welcome to uncomfortable recognition. "Miss Holloway, we haven't seen you in an age." "Good morning, Mrs. Porter." Sarah kept her voice level. "I've come for the quilting cotton father ordered." Of course, the woman bustled about, avoiding Sarah's eyes. "Emma will be sorry to have missed you." "She's taken to asking after you." Sarah softened slightly. "How is Emma?" "Spirited as ever." "Made friends with that new girl, the rancher's daughter?" "They're thick as thieves these days." Sarah collected her package, paid, and escaped as quickly as politeness allowed. The land office was her next stop, and her footsteps slowed as she approached. If Jack Archer had business with her father, he might be inside. The office was empty save for Mr. Davis, the aging clerk who'd served as Timber Creek's record keeper for 3 decades. "Miss Holloway," he greeted her, pushing spectacles up his nose. "Your father mentioned you'd be by. Got the easement papers right here." Sarah reviewed the documents with careful attention, though her mind kept wandering to the adjacent property and its new owners. The terms seemed fair water access in exchange for grazing rights on 10 acres of Holloway land. "Everything appears in order," she said, dipping the pen. "Will Mr. Archer be signing today as well?" "Already has," Mr. Davis replied, turning the paper to show Jack's bold signature. "Was in yesterday with that spirited daughter of his. Polite child, but full of questions. Nearly talked my ear off about some horse." Sarah smiled despite herself. "That would be Pepper." She signed where indicated, sand-dried the ink, and was preparing to leave when the door opened. Thomas Blair stepped inside, freezing when he saw her. The room suddenly felt airless. Thomas looked thinner than she remembered, his once handsome face haggard around the edges. He removed his hat awkwardly. "Sarah, Mr. Blair." She was proud of how steady her voice sounded. Mr. Davis, sensing tension, suddenly found paperwork requiring his attention in the back room. "I didn't expect to see you in town," Thomas said, shifting his weight. Evidently, Sarah gathered her shawl. "If you'll excuse me, Sarah, wait." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What happened, Dot?" "I should explain." "There's no— Your absence was explanation enough." Dot's single quotes, his face flushed. "It wasn't what you think. Your father changed the terms. Said I'd have to work the land 5 years before any transfer of deed. It wasn't what we agreed." "We," Sarah repeated flatly. "There never was a we, was there, Thomas? Just you and your ambitions and me as the path to them. That's not fair." "No," she agreed. "It wasn't, but it was honest." And she moved toward the door, but he caught her arm. "I'm sorry, Sarah. Truly, let go of me, please. Is there a problem here?" Jack Archer stood in the doorway, filling the frame with his broad shoulders. His blue eyes were cool as they assessed Thomas's grip on Sarah's arm. Thomas released her immediately. "Private conversation, friend." "Didn't look private to me." Jack's gaze shifted to Sarah. "You all right, Miss Holloway?" "I'm fine, Mr. Archer." She straightened her shawl. "Mr. Blair was just leaving." Single quotes, Thomas's jaw tightened. "This is none of your concern, strange. When a lady looks uncomfortable, it becomes my concern." Jack's tone remained even, but something in his stance suggested he wasn't a man to be tested. Thomas looked between them, comprehension dawning. "I see. Didn't take you long to find a replacement, did it, Sarah?" The slap of Sarah's hand against his cheek echoed in the small office. Thomas staggered back, more from surprise than force. "Good day, Mr. Blair," Sarah said, voice shaking with fury. She swept past Jack and out into the street, heart hammering in her chest. Footsteps followed her. "Miss Holloway, wait." She stopped, turning to face Jack Archer with cheeks still burning from Thomas's insinuation. "I apologize you had to witness that, Mr. Archer." "No apology needed." He studied her face. "Though I might owe you one for interfering. You seem to be handling him just fine." A reluctant smile tugged at her lips. "I've had practice." Jack nodded toward the end of the street. "I was just heading to collect Lucy from the schoolhouse. Would you care to walk with me? He's been asking about you." Sarah hesitated, aware of curious eyes watching from shop windows. Walking with Jack Archer would fuel gossip, especially after the scene with Thomas. "Lucy's been worrying about that filly," Jack added. "Might do her good to hear from you that Pepper's settling in." "How is she?" Sarah asked, falling into step beside him. "Pepper, I mean. Stubborn as they come." Jack chuckled. "Won't let anyone but Lucy near her. Got a spirit that one knows her own mind. She needs patience," Sarah said, "and kindness. She was mistreated before we got her." Jack's eyes met hers. Some scars take time to heal. They walked in companionable silence until the schoolhouse came into view. Children spilled from the doorway, their laughter carrying on the autumn air. Lucy spotted them immediately, her face lighting up as she ran toward them, blonde braids bouncing. "Pa! Miss Holloway!" She skidded to a stop, clutching her slate and books. "You came to see me?" "Your father was kind enough to invite me along," Sarah explained. Lucy beamed. "Did Pa tell you about Pepper?" "She lets me brush her now, and she only tried to bite Pa once yesterday, which is better than before." "That's progress indeed," Sarah laughed. As they walked back toward town, Lucy chattering between them, Sarah became aware of stares and whispers. Mrs. Paulson and her friend Mrs. Henderson stood outside the millinery, heads bent together, eyes following the trio with undisguised interest. "Ignore them," Jack said quietly. "Small towns run on gossip." "I'm used to it," Sarah replied, though she straightened her shoulders nonetheless. Lucy, oblivious to the attention, tugged at Sarah's hand. "Will you come see Pepper? Please? Pa said I could invite you for dinner too. I helped make biscuits." Sarah glanced at Jack, who nodded. "The invitation stands. Nothing fancy, but the company would be welcome." Sarah sent word to her father that she'd be late returning, then found herself perched beside Jack on his wagon, Lucy wedged happily between them. The McKinley place, now the Archer Ranch, lay 3 miles west of town, in the opposite direction from the Holloway spread. "It's not much yet," Jack warned as they turned onto the rutted drive. "Previous owner let it go to seed. Been fixing what I can, but there's only so many hours in a day. Pa works all the time," Lucy confided, "even after I go to bed." "Sounds familiar," Sarah smiled. "My father's the same way. Says idle hands invite the devil's work." "Wise man," Jack agreed. The house came into view, a modest 2-story structure with a wide front porch. Fresh paint brightened the weathered clapboards, and smoke curled from the stone chimney. Beyond stood a newly repaired barn, its door thrown open to reveal stalls being constructed inside. "Done wonders already," Sarah observed. Jack's expression warmed with pride. "Place has good bones. Just needed someone to care for it proper again." He helped Sarah down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. She felt suddenly conscious of her size, of how his fingers couldn't span her middle as they might a slimmer woman's, but his touch betrayed no hesitation, no judgment, just the same careful respect he'd shown since their first meeting. "Pepper's this way," Lucy called, already running toward a paddock beside the barn. Inside the rough-hewn fence, the pinto filly grazed, head lifting at their approach. The horse's ears pricked forward at the sight of Lucy, but flattened when she spotted the adults. "She remembers me," Sarah murmured, recognizing the wariness in the animal's dark eyes. "Told you she was smart," Jack said. "Took to Lucy right away, though. Never seen anything like it, dot." Single quotes. Lucy climbed onto the lowest fence rail. "Come see Pepper. I brought Miss Holloway." To Sarah's surprise, the filly approached cautiously, nostrils flaring as she caught Sarah's scent. "She knows you're from her old home," Lucy said with a child's certainty. "I told her you were nice and didn't yell or use a whip like the man who had her before." Sarah winced. "My father's foreman found her half-starved in a ravine last spring. Previous owner had beaten her badly." Jack's jaw tightened. "Some men don't deserve the creatures in their care. Pa says animals no good souls," Lucy announced, reaching to stroke Pepper's nose. "That's why she likes me and Miss Holloway, but still doesn't trust Pa much." Jack laughed. "Maybe I'm just not as pretty as you, lady." Comment hung in the air between them. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the casual way he'd included her in such a statement, as though her prettiness were a fact, not a courtesy. "I think it's your beard," Lucy decided seriously. "Horses don't like scratchy things." The tension broke, and Sarah found herself laughing alongside Jack. Pepper, startled at the sound, trotting away before returning curiously. "She'd come around," Sarah assured him. "Just keep being gentle with her." "Good advice for most wild things," Jack replied, his eyes meeting hers briefly. Later, in the ranch house kitchen, Sarah rolled up her sleeves and helped Lucy set the table while Jack tended to the stew bubbling on the stove. The domestic scene felt both foreign and familiar to Sarah, whose own mother had died when she was 12, leaving her to manage a household alongside her grief. "Pa makes the best stew," Lucy informed her, carefully placing forks beside the mismatched plates. "But he burns biscuits, so I had to learn to make those." "Lucy exaggerates," Jack protested good-naturedly. "I only burned them twice." 7 times, Lucy corrected. "I counted." Sarah smiled at their easy banter. "My first attempts at biscuits were hard enough to use as doorstops. Your father must be a better teacher than mine was." "Did your ma teach you to cook?" Lucy asked, climbing onto her chair. A familiar pang of loss touched Sarah's heart. "Some. She died when I was not much older than—" Lucy's face grew solemn. "Like my ma." Jack set the pot of stew in the center of the table, his expression gentle. "Looks like we've all had our share of loss." The simple acknowledgement eased something in Sarah's chest. Here was no pity, no awkward platitude, just recognition of a shared experience. Over dinner, Sarah learned that Jack had come from Tennessee after his wife died of influenza 2 years earlier. "Couldn't stay there," he explained, breaking apart a biscuit. "Too many ghosts." Lucy needed a fresh start, and so did I. "Why Timber Creek?" Sarah asked. "Heard about land going cheap. Good grazing, reliable water if you knew where to dig. Figured I could build something here." He glanced at Lucy, who was feeding bits of biscuit to the cat that had appeared beneath the table. "A future for her. And horses," Lucy added. "Pa's the best with horses. Even better than my grandpa was, and he trained horses for soldiers." "Now who's exaggerated?" Jack teased, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. "After dinner." Lucy insisted on showing Sarah her room, a small space beneath the eaves that Jack had painted yellow and furnished with a narrow bed, a chest for clothes, and bookshelves built from reclaimed wood. Pa reads to me every night, Lucy said, pointing to the small collection of books. And someday I'll have enough books to fill all the shelves. When they returned downstairs, Jack had coffee waiting. Lucy, stifling yawns, was sent to prepare for bed with promises that Sarah would visit again soon. She's a wonderful child, Sarah said once Lucy had gone upstairs. So open-hearted. Jack nodded, his expression soft. Gets that from her mother. Madeline never met a stranger she couldn't befriend within 5 minutes. You must miss her terribly. Every day. He stared into his coffee. But Lucy makes it easier. Hard to stay broken when you've got a child counting on you to be whole. Sarah understood that kind of love, the kind that forced you to keep moving forward when grief threatened to root you in place. She'd done the same for her father after her mother died. I should be getting back, she said reluctantly. Father will worry, Jack nodded. I'll hitch up the wagon. The ride back to town passed in comfortable silence, broken only by the creaking of the wagon and the rhythmic plod of the horses' hooves. Stars emerged in the darkening sky, brilliant and uncountable against the velvet blackness. Thank you, Sarah said as they approached the general store where her father would be waiting. For dinner and for ... She hesitated. For seeing me. Not just looking, but seeing. Jack's hand stilled on the rein. Sarah. Her name in his mouth sounded different. Value. This town's got eyes, but no vision. They see what's easy to see, not what matters. And what matters, Mr. Archer? She asked, barely above a whisper. Jack, he corrected gently. And what matters is how Lucy lit up when she saw you today. How Pepper trusted you when she trusts almost no one. How you stand straight despite what folks whisper. His gaze held hers in the darkness. A person's measure isn't taken by their shape, but by the space they fill in others' lives. The wagon rolled to a stop. James Holloway stood on the boardwalk, raising a hand in greeting. Sarah's time in this moment was ending, but something new had begun, something tender and fragile as a spring seed. Will you come to Sunday dinner? She asked impulsively. You and Lucy both. Father would enjoy the company, I think. Jack smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. We'd be honored. As her father helped her down from the wagon, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months, perhaps years. Behind her, she heard Jack call a polite greeting to her father. Arrangements being made for Sunday. Seems like a decent man, James commented as they drove home, the night wrapping around them like a familiar quilt. He is, Sarah agreed, watching the stars overhead. For the first time since Thomas Blair had left her standing alone in a church, Sarah allowed herself to feel something dangerous and bright, a flicker of hope. Sunday dawned clear and crisp, with just enough chill in the air to hint at winter's approach. Sarah rose earlier than usual, her mind already racing through preparations for dinner. She'd spent Saturday baking an apple pie and preparing side dishes, but the roast would need hours in the oven, and the house required a thorough cleaning. Her father found her scrubbing the parlor floor with unusual vigor, sleeves rolled to her elbows and hair escaping its pins. Thought we were having guests, not the governor, he remarked, leaning against the doorframe. Sarah sat back on her heels, wiping her forehead with her forearm. I just want everything to be nice. James Holloway's weathered face softened. Been a while since I've seen you fuss like this. Not since. This is different, Sarah interrupted, returning to her scrubbing with renewed determination. Her father wisely chose not to comment further, retreating to the barn where the day's chores awaited. Sarah continued her domestic assault, attacking dust and disorder with the same fierce energy she'd once directed at preparing for her wedding day. By noon, the ranch house gleamed, the roast filled the air with savory promise, and Sarah had changed into her best Sunday dress, a deep blue calico with ivory buttons that Martha had helped her make last Christmas. When hoofbeats announced the Archers' arrival, Sarah smoothed her hair one last time before stepping onto the porch. Jack guided their wagon into the yard, Lucy beside him in a freshly pressed dress, her blonde hair neatly braided with blue ribbons. The sight of them, father and daughter dressed in their Sunday best, sent an unexpected flutter through Sarah's chest. Miss Holloway, Lucy called, waving enthusiastically. We brought honey from our new bees. Jack helped his daughter down before approaching with a small crock. Our first harvest, he explained, handing it to Sarah. Not much, but the bees are settling in well. This is wonderful, Sarah said, accepting the gift. I was just lamenting to father that we'd run out of honey for winter. James Holloway emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He greeted Jack with a firm handshake and Lucy with a gruff but genuine smile. Heard you've taken on that troublesome pinto of ours, he said to the little girl. How's she behaving for you? Lucy launched into a detailed account of Pepper's progress, her enthusiasm drawing a rare chuckle from the older man. Sarah caught Jack's eye over the child's head, sharing a moment of quiet amusement at Lucy's animated description. Inside, Sarah served the meal she'd prepared with such roast beef with potatoes and carrots, fresh bread still warm from the oven, pickled beets from the summer garden, and apple pie waiting for dessert. Lucy's eyes widened at the spread. This looks even better than Christmas dinner, Lucy, Jack admonished gently, but Sarah waved away his concern. That's high praise indeed, she said, filling Lucy's plate. I hope it tastes as good as it looks. Conversation flowed as easily as they ate. James and Jack discovered a shared interest in breeding horses, debating bloodlines and training methods with the intensity of men finding common ground. Lucy kept them entertained with stories from school, while Sarah found herself watching the tableau with a sense of rightness she hadn't expected. After the meal, James insisted on showing Jack his prized stallion, leaving Sarah and Lucy to clear the table. "Pa says you make the best pie he's ever tasted," Lucy confided as she carefully carried plates to the wash basin. "He told me last night when he was tucking me in." Sarah smiled, pleased despite herself. "Did he now?" Lucy nodded solemnly. "He says you'd make someone a fine wife someday." The words, innocent as they were, struck Sarah like a physical blow. The memory of Thomas's rejection, of standing abandoned in her wedding dress, suddenly felt fresh again. "Your father was just being kind," she managed, turning away to hide her expression. "No, he meant it," Lucy insisted. "I asked if he thought you were pretty, and he said—" "Lucy," Sarah interrupted gently. "Sometimes grown-ups say polite things they don't necessarily mean." The little girl frowned. "Pa doesn't lie. He says lies are like stealing trust, and you can't ever give it all back." Before Sarah could respond, the back door opened, and Jack and James returned, deep in discussion about water rights and grazing land. The moment passed, but Lucy's words lingered in Sarah's mind as they enjoyed pie and coffee in the parlor. Later, as afternoon shadows lengthened, James suggested showing Lucy the new foals in the south pasture. The girl eagerly accepted, leaving Sarah and Jack alone on the porch, rocking chairs creaking in companionable rhythm. "Your father's good with her," Jack observed. "Not many men have the patience for a child's endless questions." Sarah smiled. "He always wanted more children. After Mother died, I think he poured all those unrealized hopes into raising me." "You were fortunate to have him," Jack said. "Many fathers wouldn't know what to do with a daughter on their own, just as many wouldn't have managed as well as you have with Lucy." Jack's gaze drifted to where his daughter walked hand in hand with James toward the pasture. "Some days I wonder if I'm doing right by her. A girl needs a mother's guidance. She seems wonderfully well adjusted to me," Sarah assured him. "Happy, kind, curious. You've done well, Jack." He turned to her, expression serious. "Lucy mentioned something to you, didn't she, about our conversation last night?" Heat crept into Sarah's cheeks. "Children repeat everything, don't they?" "Not everything," Jack said quietly. "Just the things that matter to them." A moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibilities. Sarah broke it first, rising from her chair. "Would you like more coffee?" Jack stood as well, closer than she'd expected. Sarah, the way he said her name like a declaration rather than a question, made her pause. "I'm not a man who speaks without meaning," he said, his voice low and certain. "Nor am I one who lets others, especially my daughter, speak falsely on my behalf." Sarah's heart quickened. "Jack, you don't have to." "I do," he interrupted gently, "because I see how you flinch when someone pays you a compliment as though you're waiting for the barb hidden inside it. This town has taught you to distrust kindness, and that's a crying shame." His directness left her speechless. No one in Timber Creek had ever addressed her size or the town's treatment of her so plainly. "Whatever Lucy told you," Jack continued, "you can trust it was the truth as I see it. I don't say things I don't mean, especially not to my daughter from the pasture." Lucy's laughter carried on the autumn air. Sarah found herself unable to meet Jack's steady gaze, her eyes fixed instead on the weathered porch boards beneath their feet. "Why?" she finally asked, the single word containing a lifetime of uncertainty. Jack's calloused fingers gently tilted her chin upward until their eyes met. "Because there's more beauty in how you smile at my daughter than in all the painted ladies in Denver." The simple statement, delivered without flourish or expectation, unraveled something tightly wound inside Sarah's chest. She blinked rapidly against unexpected tears. "I should check on that coffee," murmured, stepping back. Jack let her go, understanding in his eyes. "No rush. We've got time." Those 4 words, "we've got time," followed Sarah into the kitchen, wrapping around her like a promise. As she busied herself with cups and saucers, she caught her reflection in the window, glass-flushed cheeks, bright eyes, a smile she couldn't quite suppress. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah Holloway looked at herself and didn't immediately see all the ways she failed to measure up. Instead, she saw a woman who might perhaps be worthy of honest admiration, a woman who made pies that earned praise, who tamed skittish horses, who filled spaces in others' lives. A woman who, despite everything, might still have time for something beautiful to grow. October slipped into November, and with it came a shift in Timber Creek's rhythm. Farmers hurried to bring in the last harvests before frost, ranchers prepared livestock for winter months, and the general store's shelves filled with wool, flannel, and other cold weather necessities. Sarah found herself venturing into town more frequently, no longer avoiding the whispers that followed her. What had once seemed unbearable now felt merely irritating, like flies buzzing around a picnic. She had more important matters to occupy her thoughts, chief among them the water rights agreement with the Archer Ranch that had evolved into twice-weekly visits between the two properties. "Official business," her father would announce gruffly before riding over to consult with Jack about windmill repairs or fence line. "Educational opportunities," Jack would declare when bringing Lucy to learn about cattle management from James Holloway, whom the girl had taken to calling Mr. H. Sarah saw through these transparent excuses but played along, just as she pretended not to notice how her father always wore his good shirt on days the Archers were expected, or how Jack found reasons to linger when Lucy's lessons were finished. On a brisk Tuesday morning, Sarah drove the wagon into town alone, a list of supplies tucked in her pocket alongside a letter to her aunt in Denver. The streets were busy busy with pre-winter activity and she nodded politely to those who met her eye, ignoring those who didn't. Inside the general store, Mrs. Porter greeted her with something approaching warmth. "Miss Holloway, just-in-time shipment of winter boots arrived yesterday. Set aside a pair in your size, as you mentioned last." "Thank you," Sarah said, genuinely surprised at the consideration. That was thoughtful. The shopkeeper lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Hear you've been spending time with the Archer family. Nice man, that Jack. Widower, you know. Not many men could raise a daughter so well on their own." Sarah busied herself examining the boots. Archer's a good father, and quite handsome," Mrs. Porter added, eyes twinkling. "Caused quite a stir among the unmarried ladies when he arrived, though he doesn't seem interested in their attention." Before Sarah could respond, the bell above the door jangled. Thomas Blair entered, stopping short when he saw her. The shopkeeper glanced between them and discreetly moved to help another customer, leaving an uncomfortable silence in her wake. "Sarah," Thomas nodded stiffly. "Thomas." She turned back to the boots, hoping he would conduct his business and leave. Instead, he approached, hat in hand. "I've been meaning to speak with you. We have nothing to discuss. I disagree." His voice dropped. "People are talking, Sarah. About you and that Archer fellow." She stiffened. "People in this town talk regardless of what I do. It's different now. They're saying he's courting you. And if he were..." Sarah faced him, chin raised. "Would that concern you?" Thomas frowned. "Don't want to see you made a fool of again." The irony of his statement was so profound that Sarah nearly laughed. "That's rich coming from you. I know I hurt you. You humiliated me," she corrected, keeping her voice low but firm. "You left me standing in a church wearing my mother's wedding dress because my father saw through your intentions." Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "It wasn't only about the land, wasn't it?" Sarah gathered the boots and moved toward the counter. "It doesn't matter now. Whatever your reasons, you did me a favor in the end." His expression hardened. "By making you desperate enough to throw yourself at the first newcomer who showed you kindness." Sarah set the boots down with deliberate care, fighting to control her temper. "You forfeited any right to an opinion about my life the moment you failed to appear at our wedding. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have errands to complete." She paid for her purchases, nodded to Mrs. S. Porter, and left without looking back, though she could feel Thomas's eyes following her. Outside, the crisp air cooled her flushed cheeks as she crossed to the post office. "Miss Holloway," Lucy's voice cut through Sarah's troubled thoughts. The girl waved from down the street where she stood with Emma Porter outside the millinery. Sarah waved back, her spirits lifting at the sight of the child's enthusiasm. "We're looking at hair ribbons," Lucy explained when Sarah approached. "Miss Emma says blue ones match my eyes best." "A wise assessment," Sarah agreed, smiling at Emma Porter, who had inherited none of her mother's propensity for gossip. Pause at the feed store, Lucy continued. "He said I could wait here if I was good. Are you going to the ranch today?" "Pa made stew again." "Not today, sweetheart. I have chores at home." Lucy's face fell. "But it's been 3 whole days since you visited." Sarah smoothed the girl's hair. "Perhaps tomorrow. Your father and I still need to discuss the south pasture fence." "Always fences and water and boring grown-up things." Lucy sighed dramatically. "When are you going to teach me to make pie like you promised?" "Lucy Archer, are you pestering Miss Holloway?" Jack appeared behind them, a sack of feed slung over one shoulder. The sight of him strong, capable, eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled, sent a familiar warmth through Sarah's chest. "Not pestering," Lucy protested, reminding, "about pie lessons." Jack shifted the heavy sack. "Apologies, Sarah. She's been talking about your apple pie for weeks." "No apology needed," Sarah assured him. "I did promise to teach her tomorrow," Lucy pleaded. "Please?" "School's let out early for teachers' meeting." Sarah glanced at Jack, who nodded. "If it's not an imposition." "Never," she answered, perhaps too quickly. "I'll bring apples from our cellar." As they spoke, Sarah became aware of eyes watching from the dressmaker's shop across the street. Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Paulson stood in the doorway, heads bent in conversation, their gaze fixed on the little group. Jack noticed her discomfort. "Everything all right? Just the usual?" Sarah murmured. "Timber Creek's unofficial welcoming committee." Jack turned, meeting the women's stares directly until they had the decency to look away. "Small towns," he said, shaking his head. "Always amazes me how folks with the least to be proud of take the most pride in judging others." Lucy tugged at his sleeve. "Can we invite Miss Holloway to the harvest dance, Pa? Please?" Sarah froze. The annual harvest dance was Timber Creek's largest social event to celebration before winter set in. Held in the town hall and attended by nearly everyone within 20 miles. "Lucy," Jack began, clearly sensing Sarah's tension. "Miss Holloway might have other plans." "I don't go to the dance," Sarah said quietly. "Never have." Lucy looked between them, confused. "But it's fun. Emma says there's music and cider and pie contests. You make the best pies." "Perhaps Miss Holloway prefers quieter Eve," Jack suggested gently. But his eyes held a question when they met Sarah's. Sarah remembered previous harvest dances, watching from afar as couples twirled across the floor, pretending she didn't care that no one asked her to join them. Years of sitting at home while the rest of Timber Creek celebrated, telling herself it didn't matter. "The truth is," she said, finding her voice, "no one's ever invited me before. Understanding crossed Jack's face, followed by something that looked remarkably like anger. He set the feed sack down and straightened to his full height. "Sarah Holloway," he said formally, loud enough for passers-by to hear. "Would you do me the honor of accompanying Lucy and me to the harvest dance this Saturday?" Her heart hammered against her ribs. Across the street, Mrs. Henderson's mouth had fallen open in undisguised shock. "People will talk," Sarah warned, barely above a whisper. Jack's eyes never left hers. "Let them. Say yes." Lucy bounced on her toes. "Please say yes." A lifetime of insecurity warred with the warmth in Jack's steady gaze. Sarah thought of all the times she'd hidden away, protecting herself from Timber Creek's judgment, and something inside her, something that had bent but never broken, straightened at last. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I would be delighted to attend the dance with you both." Lucy clapped her hands in delight, while Jack's smile spread slowly across his face like sunrise over the mountains. Neither of them noticed Thomas Blair watching from the general store doorway, his expression dark as a gathering storm. Saturday arrived too quickly and not soon enough. Sarah stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, scrutinizing her reflection with an intensity that bordered on pain. The dress hurt only good. Dress besides the ill-fated wedding gown was a deep burgundy wool that Martha had helped her alter last winter. It had seemed perfectly adequate for church services and the occasional social call, but for a dance? "You look fine," her father said from the doorway, his gruff voice softened with affection. "Fussing won't change anything," Sarah sighed, adjusting the ivory lace collar for the dozenth time. "Perhaps this is a mistake." James Holloway crossed the room to stand behind his daughter, his weathered hands resting on her shoulders. "Sarah Elizabeth, you've never backed down from anything in your life. Don't start now. This is different, Pa." She gestured helplessly at her reflection. "Everyone will be watching, whispering. I'll be the joke of the evening, only if you act like one." He squeezed her shoulders gently. "Stand tall, like your mother always did." God knows she faced her share of wagging tongues when she married a rough rancher with more ambition than money. The comparison startled Sarah. Her mother had been slim and beautiful in the daguerreotype that stood on her father's bedside table. That was different. "Mother was exactly like you," he interrupted, strong-willed, kind-hearted, and too concerned with what others thought. Took her years to realize most folks' opinions aren't worth the breath used to speak them. A knock at the front door ended the conversation. James patted her shoulder once more. "That'll be your escort. Quite punctual, that Archer fellow." Sarah heard Lucy's excited voice before she descended the stairs, the child's enthusiasm carrying through the house like music. Jack stood in the entryway, hat in hand, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark coat that transformed him from hard-working rancher to something approaching a gentleman. His blue eyes widened slightly when he saw her, and the naked appreciation in them gave Sarah courage. "You look beautiful," he said simply. Before she could deflect the compliment, Lucy gasped, "Like a princess." "Doesn't she look like a princess, Pa?" Jack smiled down at his daughter. "Even better. Princesses are only pretty in stories. Miss Holloway is beautiful in real life." The wagon ride to town passed in a blur of Lucy's chatter and Jack's steady presence beside Sarah on the seat. Lanterns already glowed from the town hall windows as they approached, fiddle music spilling into the night. Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. "We don't have to stay long," Jack said quietly, reading her tension. "Just one dance, then we can claim Lucy needs a rest." "I do not," the child protested from behind. "I can dance all night like Cinderella." Sarah managed to smile. "Let's see how it goes." Inside, the hall had been transformed. Autumn leaves and wheat sheaves decorated the walls, tables groaned with pies and cakes, and the center of the room had been cleared for dancing. Nearly every resident of Timber Creek had turned out, from infants to grandparents, all dressed in their finest. The music faltered briefly as they entered. Heads turned. Conversations paused, and Sarah felt the weight of every stare like physical pressure against her skin. She considered fleeing, but Jack's hand came to rest at the small of her back, steady, warm, grounding. "Cider first, I think," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearest. "Lucy's been talking about Mrs. Porter's apple cider all week." His normalcy in the face of their scrutiny broke the spell. The music resumed, conversations restarted, though Sarah knew they had simply become more discreet in their observation. Lucy pulled them toward the refreshment table where Emma Porter waved excitedly. "You came!" Emma beamed. "Lucy said you would, but Mama wasn't sure." Mrs. Porter, serving cider nearby, had the grace to look embarrassed. "Lovely to see you, Miss Holloway. You look very nice this evening." The hesitation before nice spoke volumes, but Sarah found it didn't sting as it once might have. "Thank you, Mrs. Porter. Everything looks wonderful." They found a place along the wall where they could watch the dancing. Lucy and Emma soon joined a group of children playing a clapping game in the corner, leaving Sarah and Jack in a pocket of relative privacy. "Holding up all right?" he asked, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "It's better than expected," she admitted, "though I suspect that's largely due to my formidable escort." Jack chuckled. "Formidable, am I? You must admit you present a rather imposing figure, Mr. Archer." "Only when necessary." His eyes grew serious. "Sarah, I want you to know." Whatever he intended to say was interrupted by Reverend Paulson's approach, his wife trailing behind with a fixed smile. "Miss Holloway, Mr. Archer." The Reverend greeted them. "How good of you to join our little celebration. Wouldn't miss it?" Jack replied easily. Timber Creek knows how to welcome the change of season. Mrs. Paulson's gaze flicked over Sarah's dress, her smile never reaching her eyes. Miss Holloway, we've missed you at these gatherings in the past. What a pleasant surprise to see you this year. The implication was clear. Sarah's presence was unexpected and perhaps unwelcome. Before she could respond, Jack spoke. I'm the fortunate one, he said, voice firm. Miss Holloway graciously accepted my invitation, despite having many demands on her time. Her father speaks highly of her management of their ranch affairs. The subtle reminder of the Holloway's substantial property seemed to give Mrs. Paulson pause. Yes, well, the buffet table needs attention, if you'll excuse us. As they departed, Sarah exhaled slowly. Thank you. Jack shook his head. No thanks needed for speaking the truth. The fiddler struck up a lively reel and couples filled the dance floor. Lucy appeared, tugging at Jack's sleeve. Dance with me, Pa. You promised, Jack grinned, bowing formally to his daughter. Would the young lady care to join me for this reel? Lucy giggled, executing a wobbly curtsy before allowing her father to lead her to the floor. Sarah watched, heart full, as Jack guided his daughter through the steps, occasionally lifting her when the dance required turns too complicated for her small feet. The joy between them was palpable, drawing smiles even from the most determined gossips. Quote, when the music ended, Lucy ran back to Sarah, breathless and beaming. Your turn now. Sarah shook her head. Oh, I don't... Please? Lucy implored. Pa's the best dancer. He won't step on your toes like Jimmy Wilson did to Emma. Jack approached more slowly, offering his hand as the musicians began a waltz. May I have this dance, Miss Holloway? The hall seemed to quiet again, attention turning their way. Sarah hesitated, terror and longing waging war inside her chest. She'd never danced with a man before, had never been asked, had never expected to be. People are watching, she whispered. Let them see something worth watching then, Jack answered, his hand still extended. Drawing a deep breath, Sarah placed her fingers in his. Jack led her to the edge of the dance floor, positioning them where they would be less conspicuous among the other couples. His right hand settled respectfully at her waist, his left holding hers with gentle firmness. I don't know the steps, she confessed as they began to move. Just follow my lead, he murmured near her ear. I won't let you falter. And somehow she didn't. Jack guided her with such confidence that her own uncertainty melted away. They moved together, not with the practiced grace of lifelong dancers, but with a synchronicity that felt like conversation without words. Sarah gradually became aware that her size, which had always seemed cumbersome and shameful, felt different in Jack's arms. Substantial, yes, but not wrong. Not something to apologize for. As they turned, Sarah caught glimpses of watching faces. Some showed surprise, others speculation. Mrs. Henderson whispered behind her fan to Mrs. Paulson, but there were also smiles, Martha Wilkins nodding in approval, Emma and Lucy watching with undisguised delight, and her father standing in the doorway, having arrived late, his expression a mixture of pride and protective concern. Then she saw him, Thomas Blair, standing by the punch bowl, his face twisted with an emotion Sarah couldn't name. Their eyes met briefly before Jack turned her again, and the moment passed. You're natural, Jack said, drawing her attention back. Sarah laughed softly, a natural pretender perhaps. No pretense needed, he countered. Just trust. As the waltz ended, Jack didn't immediately release her. For a breath, they stood together, connected, amid the swirl of Timber Creek society that had so long excluded her. Thank you, Sarah said, and this time the words carried the weight of everything she couldn't yet express. Jack's smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in the way that had become dear to her. The pleasure was entirely mine. The harvest dance marked a turning point, though Sarah didn't immediately recognize it as such. In the days that followed, she noticed subtle shifts in how Timber Creek regarded her. Mrs. Porter held conversations that extended beyond mere transaction. Martha Wilkins proudly introduced her to a visit, and even Mrs. Paulson managed a genuine good morning after Sunday service. Seems you've been upgraded from pariah to curiosity, her father remarked dryly when Sarah mentioned these changes. I'm not sure that's an improvement, she replied, though privately she admitted the absence of open mockery was refreshing. November deepened, bringing the first dusting of snow and preparations for Thanksgiving. Sarah found herself busier than ever, splitting time between the Holloway ranch and helping Jack winterize his property. Lucy had taken to accompanying her father on almost every visit, her presence a bright counterpoint to the season's growing darkness. Miss Emma says you're practically family now, Lucy announced one afternoon as she helped Sarah hang quilts to air on the porch railing. She says everyone knows Mr. Archer is sweet on you. Sarah nearly dropped the corner she was holding. Lucy, that's not something. Are you sweet on Pa? The girl interrupted, her blue eyes so like her father's, wide with innocent curiosity. How to answer such a question? The truth was complicated, layered with fear and hope and a lifetime of protecting herself from disappointment. Your father is a good man, Sarah said carefully. I value his friendship very much. Lucy considered this, her small face scrunching in thought. Ma used to say friendship is where love starts growing, like seeds before flowers. Before Sarah could respond, Jack's voice called from the barn where he was helping James repair a broken stall door. Lucy darted off, leaving Sarah with quilt corners and tangled thoughts. The following Tuesday, Sarah drove to town alone for supplies. Winter was coming in earnest, and the general store bustled with last-minute preparations. She was examining a bolt of heavy flannel when a familiar voice made her stiffen. "Quite domestic these days, aren't you, Sarah?" She turned to find Thomas Blair standing too close, his breath smelling faintly of whiskey despite the early hour. "Thomas," she stepped back. "If you'll excuse me." He shifted, blocking her path. "Not so quick to run when it's your precious widower, are you? I have nothing to say to you, that's not what I hear." His voice lowered. "Here you've got plenty to say at the Archer place. Practically living there, according to some." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What I do is no longer your concern, just looking out for you." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Man lost one wife already. Might just be looking for a convenient replacement. Someone substantial to cook and clean and mind his brat while he builds his ranch." The words hit their mark with practiced precision. Sarah had asked herself the same questions in the darkness of sleepless nights. Was Jack simply seeking a mother for Lucy? Practical partnership rather than something deeper? "Step aside, Thomas. He'll never marry you," Thomas continued, voice barely above a whisper. "Men like him, handsome, capable, they don't tie themselves to women like you when they have options. He's using you, just like you accused me of doing." "That's enough." The command came not from Sarah, but from Martha Wilkin, who had approached unnoticed. "Mr. Blair, I believe your business here is concluded." Thomas straightened, mask of civility slipping back into place. "Just having a friendly conversation with an old acquaintance." "Didn't sound friendly to these old ears," Martha replied sharply. "Miss Holloway, I believe Mrs. Porter needs assistance with your order." Grateful for the intervention, Sarah moved away. Thomas's poisonous words clung to her like burrs, not because they were new fears, but because they echoed her own deepest insecurities. Later, as Martha helped load her purchases into the wagon, the older woman spoke without preamble. "Don't you let that snake spoil what's growing between you and Jack Archer." Sarah secured a sack of flour. "There's nothing." "Nonsense," Martha interrupted. "I've lived in Timber Creek 63 years, girl. Seen marriages bloom and wither. What's between you two is the real kind, the kind that starts with seeing, not just looking." She patted Sarah's hand. "And that child adores you like you hung the moon." "Lucy is special," Sarah admitted softly. "But Thomas isn't entirely wrong. Jack could have any woman in the county. Why would he choose someone like me?" Martha's weathered face softened. "Because some men measure a woman's worth by more than what their eyes tell them. James Holloway raised you better than to think otherwise." The snow began in earnest on the ride home, fat flakes swirling around the wagon. Sarah's mind turned Martha's words over like riverstone, searching for truth among the smooth surfaces. At the ranch, she found her father and Jack in serious conversation by the fireplace, maps spread between them. "Storm's moving in fast," James greeted her. "Jack's staying the night. Too dangerous to head back to his place with Lucy in this weather." "Lucy?" Sarah glanced around. "Sleep upstairs," Jack explained. "Wore herself out helping your father with the chicken." Sarah hung her wet cloak by the fire. "I'll prepare the guest room." "Already done," her father said, rolling the maps. "Think I'll turn in myself. These old bones feel the cold more each year." His departure left an awkward silence. Sarah busied herself arranging her purchases while Jack added wood to the fire. "Your father's been telling me about the blizzard of '83, Jack said finally. "Said you were just a girl, but helped him dig out paths to the barn to feed the livestock." Sarah smiled at the memory. "Pa carried me on his shoulders through the drifts. Said I was the perfect lookout, perched up high. You two have a special bond. He's a good man. Raised me alone from 12 onward, never remarried, though plenty urged him to." She paused. "I think part of him is still waiting for my mother, even after all these years." Jack nodded. "Some loves mark you forever." Something in his tone made Sarah look up. Jack stood by the fire, flames painting his profile in gold and shadow, his expression distant. "Do you still miss her very much?" Sarah asked soft, Lucy's mother. "Every day," he answered honestly, "but not in the same way now. Grief changes, like wood seasoning, still the same timber, but different in its nature." He turned to face her fully. "Madeline would have liked you. She believed in seeing people clearly. Thomas said something today." Sarah found herself saying, the words escaping before she could reconsider. "About you seeking a mother for Lucy. A convenient arrangement." Jack's expression darkened. "Thomas Blair needs to mind his own affairs. He's not entirely wrong to question it." Sarah persisted, needing to lance this wound before it festered. "You could have any unmarried woman in Timber Creek. Women who are more suitable." "Suitable," Jack repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "By whose measure? You know what I mean? I'm afraid I don't." He crossed the room to stand before her. "Explain to me what makes a woman suitable in Timber Creek's estimation." Sarah swallowed hard. "Someone prettier, slimmer, someone who wouldn't be whispered about or pitied for catching your eye." Jack's jaw tightened. "Do you think so little of me that you believe I'd choose a wife based on how she looks standing beside me? Or worse, based on what this town might whisper?" "No, but there are no buts, Sarah." His voice gentled. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with convenience or practicality, though you are the most capable woman I've ever known." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers enveloping hers. "When Madeline died, I thought that part of my life was over. I had Lucy, My work, it seemed enough. Then we came to Timber Creek, and there you were in the park, a woman in a wedding dress with the saddest eyes I'd ever seen, being kind to my daughter. Sarah's heart thundered in her chest as Jack continued, his voice low and certain. I've been falling in love with you since that moment, Sarah Holloway. Not because you might make a good mother for Lucy, though you would, not despite your size or because of it, but because of who you are, strong, gentle, honest, brave. The word love hung in the air between them, impossible to take back or ignore. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't explain joy or fear or simple disbelief that such words could be meant for her. Jack, A cry from upstairs interrupted whatever she might have said. Lucy's voice sharp with fear. Papa, where are you? Jack squeezed Sarah's hand once before releasing it. We'll finish this conversation, he promised, already moving toward the stairs. Sarah remained by the fire, his words echoing in her mind as the storm howled outside and something equally powerful stirred within. Sarah waited by the fire, listening to Jack's footsteps overhead and the gentle murmur of his voice as he comforted Lucy. The wind howled around the corners of the house, rattling windows and sending drafts skittering across the wooden floors. Outside, snow continued to fall in thick, relentless curtains. Love, she whispered to herself, testing the shape of the word on her tongue. It seemed impossible that Jack Archer, handsome, kind, respected Jack, could use such a word in reference to her, yet there had been no mistaking his sincerity, no hint of pity or calculation in his steady gaze. The stairs creaked, and Sarah looked up to find Jack descending. His expression softened with paternal concern. Is Lucy all right? She asked. Nightmare, he explained, returning to his place by the fire. She sometimes dreams about the fever that took her mother. Being in a strange place during a storm probably stirred it up. Poor thing. Should you stay with her? Jack shook his head. She's already drifting back to sleep. Asked me to leave the lamp lit is all. He hesitated. Sarah, about what I said before. You don't need to explain, she interrupted, suddenly afraid of what might follow. The storm, the close quarters. Emotions run high in such conditions. Jack's brow furrowed. Do you think I spoke without meaning? That I would declare love lightly or take it back, once said. Put that way, it did seem inconsistent with everything she knew of him. Jack Archer was many things, but fickle was not among them. No, she admitted. But loving someone and building a life together are different matters. True enough. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. So let me be clear about my intentions, Sarah Holloway. I love you. I want to court you properly with your father's blessing, and if you'll have me, I want to make you my wife. The directness of his proposal left her breathless. This was no vague suggestion of affection, no half-hearted arrangement of convenience. This was a man who knew his mind and heart, offering both without reservation. Jack, there are things to consider, she managed. Lucy adores you, he finished. Talks about you constantly. Asks when we can make our visits more permanent. The town can mind its own business or not as it chooses. His voice was firm. I didn't come to Timber Creek seeking its approval, and I won't let its prejudices dictate my happiness. Your reputation is my own to risk. He took her hands in his. Sarah, I've watched you shrink yourself, not in body, but in spirit, to accommodate this town's narrow vision. I've seen you flinch at kindness because you expect the barb that usually follows. I've seen the woman you truly are peek through that armor, especially with Lucy. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. I'm not asking you to trust Timber Creek. I'm asking you to trust me, to trust that I know my own heart. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, his strong and weathered, hers plump but equally capable, hands that had each built lives from difficult beginnings, that had each known work and grief and perseverance. I do trust you, she whispered. It's myself I've never trusted. The woman in the mirror never matched the woman I felt myself to be. Jack lifted her chin gently. Then perhaps it's time to reconcile the two. When he kissed her, it wasn't the passionate embrace of dime store novel or the hesitant peck of uncertain courtship. It was a promise sealed with tenderness and certainty. Sarah felt something long constricted in her chest expand, like a bird testing wings too long folded. She was the first to draw back, though her hands remained in his. I need time, Jack, not to decide how I feel. I think I've known that since you cut through Thomas's pretensions at the land office. But to believe this is real, that it can last, take all the time you need, he said. I'm not going anywhere. Morning broke clear and brilliant, the storm having moved east overnight. Lucy bounded downstairs at first light, her nightmare forgotten in the excitement of finding herself snowbound at the Holloway ranch. Can we build a snow fort, Mr. H? She asked James over breakfast, her cheeks flushed with anticipation. Pa says you built the best snow forts when Miss Sarah was little. James chuckled, a rare sound that warmed Sarah's heart. Did he now? Well, can't disappoint after such an introduction. Fetch your coat, young lady. As Lucy raced to comply, James fixed Jack with a knowing look. Suspect you two might have matters to discuss without little pictures about. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Jack met her father's gaze steadily. With your permission, sir. James nodded once. Been expecting this conversation, just see you treat her right. Sarah's worth 10 of most men I've known. No argument there, Jack agreed. When they were alone, Sarah busied herself with the breakfast dishes while Jack dried, the domestic rhythm somehow both novel and familiar. Your father guessed, Jack observed, hanging a cup on its hook. Pa misses very little, Sarah replied, especially where I'm concerned. What about you, Sarah? What are your thoughts in the light of day? She set down the plate she was washing and turned to face him fully, the same as they were last night. I love you, Jack Archer. Have for longer than I cared to admit, even to myself. His smile was like sunrise. Then we're agreed on loving each other, yes, she hesitated, but I think we should wait until after Christmas to make any formal announcement. Give Lucy time to adjust to the idea. Give the town time to what? Accept us? Jack shook his head. They'll gossip regardless of timing, I know. It's hard enough for a child who's lost her mother. I don't want to complicate the season with changes, however welcome. Jack's expression softened with understanding. You're right, of course. January then. A new year, a new beginning. A shout from outside drew their attention to the window where Lucy and James were constructing an impressive snow fortification. The sight of her stern father patiently showing Lucy how to pack snow between logs made Sarah's heart swell. She'll be all right, you know, Jack said, following her gaze. Lucy's stronger than she looks. Like someone else I know, he added, squeezing Sarah's hand. The snow kept them housebound for 2 days, a secluded interlude that cemented what was growing between them. By the time Jack and Lucy departed for their own ranch, an understanding had been reached. They would court quietly through Christmas, then announced their engagement in the new year. News traveled swiftly in Timber Creek despite winter's obstacles. Sarah wasn't surprised when Martha Wilkins arrived at the ranch the following week, ostensibly to deliver a Christmas wreath, but clearly bursting with curiosity. So, Martha said without preamble as they sat by the kitchen fire, Jack Archer spent 2 nights under your roof during the storm. Sarah continued her mending, as did his daughter. Pa put him in the guest room, and, Martha pressed, and nothing improper occurred if that's your concern. The older woman snorted. Course not. Not with James Holloway standing guard. I'm asking if anything proper occurred. Like a declaration, perhaps. Sarah couldn't hide her smile. Perhaps. Martha clapped her hands in delight. I knew it. Told Herbert you two would sort it out before Christmas. When's the announcement? After the holidays, Sarah said firmly. For Lucy's sake. Sensible, Martha nodded approving. That child's had enough upheaval. But mark my words, the town already knows something's brewing. Mrs. Henderson saw the way you two looked at each other loading supplies at the general store yesterday. Let them talk, Sarah replied, surprised at her own equanimity. They always have. Martha studied her with shrewd eyes. You've changed, girl. Standing taller. It suits you. I'm exactly as I've always been, Sarah Count. Just ... Less afraid of it now. The church Christmas pageant arrived with the usual flurry of excitement. Sarah, who normally avoided such gathering, found herself helping Mrs. Porter with costumes, while Lucy practiced her lines as the innkeeper's daughter a role Reverend Paulson had added specifically for her. You're good with children, Mrs. Porter observed as Sarah adjusted a shepherd's robe. Lucy Archer absolutely blossoms under your attention. She's a special child, Sarah replied. Makes it easy to care for her. Will you have more? Once you and Mr. Archer are married? Sarah fumbled with the pin she was holding. We haven't. Mrs. Porter smiled knowingly. Oh, come now, Miss Holloway. The whole town expects an announcement any day. It's written all over both your faces whenever you're together. Before Sarah could respond, the church door burst open with a gust of cold air. Thomas Blair staggered in, clearly intoxicated despite the early hour. Where's Archer? He demanded, his words slurring. Got business with him, Mr. Blair. Reverend Paulson hurried forward. This is most inappropriate. The children are rehearsing. Don't care about your damn pageant. Thomas spat. Care about that outsider stealing what's mine. His bloodshot eyes found Sarah across the room. You were supposed to be mine, my land, my wife. Had it all arranged till your pa interfered? Mrs. Porter gasped, pulling children behind her protectively. Sarah stood frozen, mortification and anger warring within her as Thomas lurched closer. Thomas, you're drunk, she said firmly. Go home before you embarrass yourself further. Too late for that. He laughed bitterly. Whole town's laughing at Thomas Blair, jilted for a saddle tramp with nothing but a broken-down ranch and a motherless brat. The slap echoed through the church before Sarah even realized she'd moved. Thomas staggered back, hand to his reddening cheek, as Sarah stood before him, trembling with fury. Never, she said, voice low and dangerous. Speak of Lucy that way again. For a moment, the church fell silent save for the harsh sound of Thomas's breathing. He stared at Sarah with naked shock, one hand still pressed to his cheek. You hit me, he said incredulously. You actually hit me, and I'll do it again if you speak another word against that child, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. The church door opened again, admitting Jack and James Holloway, their expressions shifting from casual conversation to alert concern as they assessed the scene before them. What's happening here? Jack asked, moving immediately to Sarah's side. Thomas's face contorted with fresh anger. Here he is, the hero of the hour, come to rescue his fat. James Holloway's hand clamped down on Thomas's shoulder before he could finish the insult. That's enough, Blair. You're drunk and making a spectacle of yourself. Get your hands off me, old man, Thomas snarled, attempting to shrug free. Pa? Lucy's small voice cut through the tension. She stood among the other children, still wearing her pageant costume, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Jack crossed to his daughter quickly, kneeling to her level. Everything's all right, sweetheart. Mr. Blair isn't feeling well. He's going to leave now. Not without saying my piece. Thomas protested, though he seemed to deflate under James's iron grip. You think you've won, Archer? Think again. Town knows what you're really after, Holloway land, same as I was. Jack stood slowly, positioning himself between Thomas and the children. Mr. Blair, I'm going to say this once, and only because you're not in your right mind. Leave now while you still have some dignity left, or what? Thomas sneered. Or I'll help you leave, Jack replied evenly. And I promise you won't enjoy the experience. Something in Jack's tone, the quiet certainty of a man who rarely made threats but always kept them seemed to penetrate Thomas's alcohol-fogged mind. He looked around the church, suddenly aware of the many witnesses to his disgrace. "This isn't over," he muttered, but allowed James to guide him toward the door. "It is," Sarah called after him, surprising herself with her boldness. "It's been over since the day you failed to appear at our wedding. The difference is, now I'm grateful for your absence." A murmur ran through the onlookers. Mrs. Porter stepped forward, her normally judgmental expression replaced with something like respect. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess," she suggested. "Children, go with Mrs. Paulson to the meeting room for cider." As the children filed out, Lucy broke away to run to Sarah, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist. "Are you all right? You look scared." Sarah knelt, smoothing Lucy's hair. "I'm not scared, sweetheart, just a little shaken." "Was he saying mean things?" "Pa says mean people are just sad inside and don't know how to be happy. Your pa's very wise." Sarah smiled, glancing up to find Jack watching them, his expression tender. That evening, with Thomas Blair safely escorted out of town by the sheriff to sober up at his isolated cabin, the 3 Holloways and 2 Archers gathered for dinner at Martha Wilkins's home. The older woman had insisted, declaring her house neutral territory for them to recover from the morning's drama. "Whole town's talking," Martha informed them as she served roast chicken. Most saying Thomas Blair's finally shown his true colors. Few saying it was about time someone stood up to him. She winked at Sarah. "Slap heard round Timber Creek. They're calling it." "Martha," Sarah protested, glancing at Lucy. "Oh, the child knows her defender when she sees one," Martha waved dismissively. "Besides, after that display, no one's questioning what's between you two anymore." Jack reached for Sarah's hand under the table. "Perhaps that's for the best." "Wait." Lucy frowned, looking between them. "What's between you? Are you keeping secrets?" The adults exchanged glances. James cleared his throat. "Think I'll help Herbert check that loose shutter in the kitchen," he announced, nodding to Martha's husband. The older couple followed his lead, leaving the 3 of them alone. Jack took a deep breath. "Lucy, there's something Sarah and I wanted to discuss with you after Christmas, but perhaps now is the right time. Single quotes, Lucy's brow furrowed. "Is it something bad?" "No, sweetheart," Sarah assured her. "At least we hope you won't think so." Jack moved to kneel beside his daughter's chair. "Lucy, you know I loved your mother very much." "I know." Lucy nodded seriously. "You said she's watching us from heaven." "That's right, and I think she'd be very happy about what I'm going to tell you." He glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragement. "I've asked Miss Holloway to marry me, to become my wife and your mother." She's said yes. Lucy's eyes widened, darting between them. "Really? You're going to be my new ma?" Sarah's heart constricted. "If that's something you would want, Lucy. If it's not, we can—" Her words were cut off as Lucy launched herself into Sarah's arms with enough force to nearly topple the chair backward. "Yes. Yes. I wanted to ask Santa for a mother, but Pa said some wishes are too big even for Santa." She hugged Sarah fiercely before pulling back to look at her with solemn blue eyes. "Will you still teach me to make pie? And can I still have pepper? And will we live at our house or here or somewhere new?" Sarah laughed through sudden tears. "Yes to pie lessons. Yes to keeping pepper. And we haven't decided about houses yet. One step at a time, sweetheart." "When?" Lucy demanded, turning to her father. "When will Sarah be my mother for real?" Jack smiled, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "We were thinking after the new year." "That's forever," Lucy protested. "It's 3 weeks," Jack corrected. "Still forever," Lucy insisted, but her smile belied her complaint. Christmas came and went in a flurry of celebration and preparation. News of the engagement spread officially after the holiday, though few expressed surprise. Even Mrs. Paulson offered congratulations that seemed genuine, if somewhat stiff. Thomas Blair left town shortly after New Year's, selling his property to a cousin from Denver and departing without farewell. Sarah felt nothing at the news but a vague relief that one shadow, at least, had lifted from Timber Creek. The wedding was set for January 20th, the date chosen because, as Lucy noted with practical wisdom, it's too cold to do much else in January anyway. Sarah spent the intervening weeks not on a new dress. She had no desire to tempt fate twice, but on a special gift for Lucy, a handmade quilt featuring appliqued horses galloping across a field of blue that matched the child's eyes. The day dawned clear and cold, the church warmed by wood stoves and filled with more well-wishers than Sarah could have imagined. Her father, resplendent in his one good suit, waited to walk her down the aisle with uncharacteristic nervousness. "Proud of you, girl," he said gruffly as they prepared to enter. "Your mother would be too." At the altar, Jack waited with Reverend Paulson, his face lighting up as Sarah appeared in the doorway. But it was Lucy, standing beside her father in a new blue dress with white lace collar, who captured Sarah's heart completely. The child fairly bounced with excitement, waving despite Mrs. Porter's attempts to maintain decorum. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of promises and prayers. When Reverend Paulson pronounced them husband and wife, Jack's kiss was gentle but certain, sealing their vows before God and Timber Creek alike. The reception held in the church hall was more lively than Sarah could have dreamed. Even Mrs. Henderson complimented her dress, her mother's altered one final time by Martha's skilled hands to fit both her figure and the occasion. As the celebration continued around them, Sarah found herself by the punch bowl, watching Jack swing Lucy in a playful dance, the child's laughter ringing above the music. Quite a change from last summer, Martha observed, joining her. Remember when you couldn't even look folk in the eye in town? Now here you are, belle of the ball. Sarah smiled. Hardly that. But yes, everything's different now. Not everything, Martha corrected. You're still the same good-hearted woman you always were. Just standing taller now. Single quotes later, as they prepared to depart for their wedding night at the Holloway ranch. Jack's place being deemed too drafty for a January honeymoon, Lucy broke away from Emma Porter to run to them. She threw her arms around Sarah's waist, then reached for her father's hand. We're a real family now, she announced with satisfaction. An elderly aunt of Martha's, hard of hearing and filter-free with age, called out from nearby. What's the child saying about the bride? Lucy turned, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. I said she's my mother now, and she's pretty, Daddy says so. Jack knelt beside his daughter, one arm around her shoulders, the other reaching for his new wife's hand. She certainly is, Lucy girl, he agreed, his voice carrying just as clearly the most beautiful bride in all of Colorado. As whispers and smiles spread through the gathered townsfolk, Sarah felt the last of her armor fall away. Jack's eyes held no lies. Lucy's love knew no boundaries. And for the first time in her life, Sarah Holloway Archer stood in Timber Creek not as an object of pity or mockery, but as a woman truly seen, truly valued, and truly loved. Ready to go home, Mrs. Archer? Jack asked, rising to stand beside her. Sarah squeezed his hand and with her other reached for Lucy's. Yes, she said simply. I'm ready.